Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about some underrated horror sequels. I've already done a video where I talked about some of the best horror sequels, and in this video I want to talk about sequels that I don't think get as much respect or sometimes get overlooked compared to other sequels in a certain franchise. Or, these are just films that fans don't tend to talk about as much as the rest of the series. There's so many horror sequels out there that are unappreciated and are underrated, and I know I'm missing a bunch of them. So if you know of any good horror sequels that you think are underrated, feel free to let me know down below in the comment section because even though there are just so many of them out there that I am not going to talk about. I will have some honorable mentions and stuff. This is not going to be a list. I'm simply just showing some of the ones off that I think are underrated. So without further ado, let's get into it. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the third film in one of my favorite horror franchises, and that is Child's Play 3. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about Child's Play 2, and I think Child's Play 2 is probably one of the best horror sequels. But this was actually the last. Was actually the last film in the Chucky series that was more serious. Because right after this they made Bride of Chucky, and then it started to become more horror comedies. This was the last one that they made. When it was still serious. Now of course, Curse of Chucky came out, which was more serious. But before Bride of Chucky, this was the last one. And this one takes place 8 years after the events of the second film. And Andy is, he's grown up and he's, at a sort of a military school. And, Chucky comes back, of course, and he gets a new kid named Tyler. There's a picture of him on the back. And, of course, Chucky, he's up to his old ways. There's a lot of things I like about this movie. For one thing, I really like the knife that Chucky uses. He uses a much bigger knife than the typical kitchen knife that he uses in the first two films. And this is also the first movie that he used a gun in. So, yeah, Child's Play 3, I know a lot of people enjoyed this one, but I don't hear it get talked about as much as the first two films in the series. So Child's Play 3, definitely underrated. Now, another movie that I want to talk about, I think is pretty underrated because the first film is such a classic. It gets re-released. It's been re-released multiple times to DVD and Blu-ray, and it gets shown on TV a lot. Like, I think the Sci-Fi Channel plays it a lot during Halloween, but this one, I really have not seen it on TV, and that is Pet Sematary 2. And, yeah, this one, it's got a very different feel from the first film. It's not as creepy. It's not as gory. This one was made in the 90s, and the first one was made in the 80s, but, this one stars Edward Furlong, who everybody probably knows played John in Terminator 2. And in this one he meets, he moves into the town where the pet cemetery is close to, and he meets this boy, and they're both being bullied in school. And the boy has this really, just this mean stepfather who is played by Clancy Brown, and he's just a total jerk in his entire movie and ends up killing his dog in it, killing the boy's dog, and it's just and of course they bring him back, and it's one movie that I think is really pretty overlooked, like compared to the first one, because I think even people that don't collect horror movies, they know about Pet Sematary. They know it because it's such a classic, and I don't even think that a lot of people even know there was a sequel to this. But yeah, Pet Sematary 2, definitely overlooked. Now, of course, I had to include at least one of the Halloween films, and I'm sure a lot of you are probably going to think that I'm going to talk about Halloween 3. Well, even though Halloween 3 does get a lot of hate, it also has a huge fan base, and it does get a lot of love from a lot of people. I'm one of those people that loves the film. So I'm not going to talk about that. Instead, I'm going to talk about Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now, I know this movie has some flaws in it. Me personally, not a huge fan of the mask. That's probably one of the major things I don't like about it. But, I mean, I don't hate the way it looks. But honestly, this movie doesn't get as much respect as I think the other films in the franchise do. For one thing, Danielle Harris, she has an amazing, performance in this one as Jamie. She's mute throughout most of the movie, and so a lot of her emotions have to go through, you know, body language and stuff like that. And I think she does a really, really good job in this one. And I know a lot of people said that, you know, Dr. Loomis was kind of a jerk in this one, but after all the stuff that Dr. Loomis has been through, you know, trying to protect the people of this town and trying to protect Jamie, you know, he's very, very frustrated. And I think that out of all the films in the franchise, this is probably some of the best one of the best performances by Dr. Loomis is in this movie. You know, Donald Pleasance, and I think that he does a great job in this one as well. You know, and I know a lot of people complain about the house because it looks so different. I mean, I didn't really like the way it looked on the outside, but I did love the way it looked on the inside. And there's some good moments about, you know, related to Halloween that there's some there's some nods to the original Halloween that I did enjoy. Like, for one thing, you know, when right before Michael comes to the house, you know, Jamie is sitting there at the same table that that Judith was sitting there when Michael killed her, and I kind of like that thing. But yeah, Halloween 5, compared to the other ones, I think is pretty underrated. It's got its flaws, but, you know. Another sequel that gets really hated is Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, I know that he spends most of his time on, you know, the cruise ship, but I personally love this movie. You know, it's not, I don't know if it's one of my favorites, but it's definitely one that I really enjoy watching over and over again. I really enjoy all the characters. There's not a whole lot of as many kill scenes in this movie, but there are some pretty good ones. Like, probably my favorite one is when Jason punches the dude's head off. And yeah, this is definitely one that gets hated on a lot, but I personally really do enjoy it. I also really enjoy the music that they use in this one as well. So Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is from the Children of the Corn series, and I've already talked about Children of the Corn 2, and that's actually one of my favorite horror sequels. The one I want to talk about is Children of the Corn 3. Now, in this one, it has two kids from, you know, from the cult. They are now living in a foster family, and they're living in the town. And it's an older brother and a younger brother. And the younger brother, named Eli, is really, really creepy in this one. And they live in a town that has a lot of urban neighborhoods, and he ends up getting a lot of the kids from the urban neighborhoods and gets them together and creates a whole new cult, and Eli becomes the new leader, and he's really, really creepy. I think that Children of the Corn 3 is one of the creepier ones in the series, and, you know, I really do enjoy it compared to the other ones. I also enjoyed Children of the Corn 4 as well, but I think 3 is definitely one that gets overlooked. You know, and I think there's a lot of bad, you know, well, not bad, but, you know, I think after 3, the movies sort of start going downhill, but I really do enjoy 3, and I think it's one that doesn't get talked about too much. Another one which is another third installment in the series, is Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Now, I know that some people might be wondering why I'm not talking about 2. Honestly, I know a lot of people that love Chainsaw 2, and I think it's one of the most liked horror sequels. This one, on the other hand, doesn't get talked about as much, and I really did enjoy this one. And this one, you know, Leatherface, he's got a new family, and so it's kind of a whole new feel to it. There's also a little girl in it that I think is supposed to be Leatherface's daughter, which is just really, really weird, because you're wondering, you know, where did she come from? But she has a little doll, and it's basically a skeleton doll thing, and there's one scene where they're torturing the main girl, and she's just like, yakety yak, don't talk back, and she's really, really creepy. I think she was also the little girl. She was the little girl version of Tina in Friday the 13th Part 7. Yeah, at the beginning of the movie. And this was also the one where Leatherface gets the huge chainsaw. I forget I think it's like 20, I forget how big the chainsaw is, but it's huge, and it's got the phrase, "the saw of his family" over it. So yeah, this one, I really do enjoy this one. It's next to the first two, of course. It's one of my favorites in the series, and it's definitely one that doesn't get talked about as much, and I think it should. Now, this next one, you can kind of call this one more of a sci-fi horror movie, but Predator 2. Now, I know that a lot of people love the original Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I think that this one gets a bit doesn't get as talked about as much, and this one is Danny Glover, and they go to Los Angeles, is where this movie is mostly set. You also have Gary Busey in it, who's like one of the guys, part of the team that's tracking down the Predator. And yeah, this one's always been a more of a fun one. I don't think it's as intense as the first movie, but it's really enjoyable. And I wanted to talk about one of the Hellraiser films, and I know as the series kept going, the Hellraiser movies kind of got worse as they went on, but one of them, I think one of the last really good ones was Hellraiser III. Now this one has a whole different feeling to it, and this one, it's not as gory as the first two. It's got a completely different feel, in my opinion. It's not as extreme. It takes place in a town, but there's some really cool moments in this one. One of my favorite scenes was when Pinhead creates one of the new Cenobites, CD, where he throws CDs into this dude's head. And that's probably one of my favorite death scenes in this film. And I think Hell on Earth, Hellraiser 3, is probably one of the least talked about films. And it's one of the last, I think, really good sequels. And then I think after that, Bloodline is probably the last decent one. And then they sort of started going downhill after that. But Hellraiser 3 is definitely a good one. Next film, I've only got two more, but the next one I'm going to talk about, everyone really loves the first one, and they love the sequel. I do too. And I think that this one gets, talked about. It's another third film. There's a lot of third sequels in the series that I don't think get talked about as much as the first two. But next one is Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead. This one, I do enjoy this one a lot. There's a lot of really, really cool scenes. Like there's one scene where Reggie, they go into a house, and there's dolls everywhere, all over the walls and stuff, and that's just really, really creepy and really, really cool. I think Phantasm 3 has a lot of really awesome moments. And then there's also this scene where Reggie gets held up onto the wall, and there's balls all around him and stuff. That's another really cool scene. So yeah, Phantasm 3 is definitely one that doesn't get talked about as much, but I think fans really do enjoy this one as well. And the last one I want to talk about, I'd say the Amityville Horror franchise is one series that I don't think it's talked about as much as a whole. I'm sure everybody knows the original because that's a classic movie. It gets played on TV. It's been re-released, and so it's one that I think pretty much everyone enjoys. And Amityville 2 is an absolutely awesome sequel, and I think a lot of people enjoy that one as well. It doesn't get talked about as much as the original, but I think after Amityville 2, the rest of the series just doesn't really get as much credit. You don't really see them on DVD as much, except for this one. This one is Amityville 3D, and this one, it gets really, really cheesy. Compared to the first two movies, which are straight-ahead horror films, this is a good, straight-ahead horror movie. But it's really cheesy, I think, compared to the other two. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not bad. There's actually a lot of really, really great, creepy moments in this. But compared to the other two, it's pretty toned down. It's only rated PG. And I think that this is one that doesn't get as talked about as the others. This was released in the new the Scream Factory Blu-ray set, I believe. And in the Amityville Horror, the DVD box set, this one is also in it. And, I think that this, compared to the later sequels like Amityville 4 and Dollhouse and all of them, this is probably the last good one. And like I said, it's got a completely different feel. It's not as creepy. It's not as, dark as the first two. It's cheesy, but it's not overly cheesy where it's silly. It's a pretty decent one. It's a pretty decent movie. But yeah, Amityville 3D, I think, is one last. And this came out back when so many 3D movies were coming out during this time. But yeah, I think that this is one that doesn't get talked about as much. So those are all the ones that I have to show off, and like I said before, there are just so many other horror sequels I think are pretty underrated, like Damien, Omen 2. I think that I really did enjoy that one. I also enjoyed Omen 3 as well. Psycho 2 is a good one. Night of the Demons 2. There's just so many other horror sequels that just don't get talked about as much, or don't get as much, recognition or as much respect as the other films in their franchises. So like I said, if there's any horror sequels that you really enjoy that you don't think are, you don't think get as much as respect or pretty underrated compared to the other ones, leave me comments down below and let me know what are some of your favorite underrated horror sequels. Thanks to everybody for watching and subscribing. I finally have over 450 subscribers, so thank you all so much for that. You know, for sharing my videos around, for commenting, for liking, for spreading my name around on YouTube and Facebook. It really does mean a lot to me. You know, thank you all so much for watching my videos. And, you know, let me know what you guys think about this video. What are some horror sequels that you would recommend that are underrated? And I will be seeing you guys next time. Bye.